afternoon. This is Debbie Q at TheRightShoe. And today, as I said, I have my special favorite guest, Lyndon from Murder at Bedtime. I live with Lyndon and Exiled Yellow Belly.
Hiya, Deb. It's great to be back. It's been a long time. You're looking radiant.
Thank you.
And,
Sober's working for me.
Absolutely. And it's great to be here. It's I don't know what time it is there, but it's a lovely, sunny, late evening.
It's 2:30.
Buckinghamshire.
Is that where you are, Buckingham?
I'm in Buckinghamshire, yes, which is about 40 miles outside London.
Wow, that's so cool, man. I would love to come over there eventually.
You'll love it.
Yes, I cannot wait. So I was promoting this for a while, and I think the last case we did, all the cases we have done have been controversial. Well, West Memphis 3, I think most people agree that they were wrongfully convicted. I mean, there's still some dissension, but for the most part. The Springfield 3 is still one of the most baffling cases I've ever heard. What happened to those three women? I have no idea. Rachel Nicow is one of the most heartbreaking cases I've ever heard, and I didn't hear of it until you had said something. But this case is truly baffling. Darlie Routier, I'm just reading this from just a snippet from Wikipedia because it puts it well. She was an American woman from Rolette, Texas, who was convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of her 5-year-old son Damon in 1996. June 6th was when it happened. She was also going to be charged with capital murder for her 6-year-old son Devon, but the reason she wasn't is because the prosecution wanted to make sure they got her. So they had two separate cases in line for her. One was going to be for Damon, one for Devon. They never even got to Devon because she was convicted for Damon. So they were going to get her no matter what. The problem is some people feel that she's innocent and some guilty, and that's what we're going to go through the whole case. What did you know about this case? Like, we were deciding which case to do, and I love that one case too. The other one what was the other case? Pamela Smart. That was a good case only because I feel that Pamela Smart I feel is completely guilty, but I think the reason all of the people that were charged with her had been let go and she hasn't is because she maintains her innocence. And I don't know, in that one I just can't see how she was innocent when everyone that case is crazy. But this case was so unusual. Did you ever hear of it before I mentioned it this time, or?
Well, I'd never heard of the Pamela Smart one.
Okay.
As normal, if you give me a choice, I always research them up to a point where I decide which one I think we should go with. And I sort of knew the name, Darlie Routier. It's sort of like stuck in my mind that I must have seen it somewhere. And when I looked into it, I thought, yeah, I have heard something about this case. So then I thought, right, I'll tell you that, yeah, let's do that one, Deb. That sounds good. And I researched it to a point where I think I can't go any further. And as we've already discussed, I'm not quite sure she did it.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I'm telling you, I go back and forth. I have to be honest. This case is, I don't know. It's one of those tough cases. And I've seen her many times interviewed. She's likable. So that makes it even more difficult because you don't want to think that she did this. It's a rough case. I guess we can start. I can go through what happened the night of June 6, 1996.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is to give out the actual details of what occurred according to Darlie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I gotcha. All right, what happened? Yeah, because I'm reading it from there, and that's okay. What she said happened was, okay, she was going through a postpartum depression. She fully says that she was having trouble, and she was having a lot of trouble sleeping, which I remember from my own postpartum. It's hard to sleep. Your hormones are all messed up. So she decided to sleep. She had 3 boys at the time. One was an infant. Gosh, it's been so long. The infant kind of got, I don't have his name off the top of my head, but she had a little infant child, and he was upstairs with her husband.
The infant was called Drake.
Drake. Oh wow! I don't think. Wow, I never think I knew that.
I don't know if you cottoned onto this, Deb, but everybody in the family's names begin with a D.
Yes, I did notice that. That's wild. That's why I think I got so confused with Damon and Devon and Darren
and Darlie
and Drake.
Drake, Damon, Devon. That's it, isn't it?
That does make it more confusing. So Drake and Damon were upstairs, and Drake and Darren. And Darlie was downstairs with Damon and Devon. I'll say what she said first. She was sleeping. All of a sudden, she felt something touch her arm, and she thought it was her son. But here, it was an intruder. And then when she fully came awake, she noticed just a lot of blood. She turned around. She was cut, like she was wrestling with this intruder. She was cut on her throat and her arm. Her boys were stabbed. She woke right up. She started screaming for Darren. He heard her screaming. He came running downstairs, and she called the 911 operator. The 911 call is heartbreaking. She sounds completely hysterical, and how I would sound if I woke up and my kids were being stabbed. I remember her screaming about the knife, and she touched the knife, so she was worried about the prints, and people gave her shit about that. But I cannot, if somebody's killing your kids, I really don't think you can say how you would feel or what you would say.
No.
So that 911 call never bothered me. It was some of the forensic evidence that was a little weird. The 911 call is heartbreaking. It's I should have pulled that. I don't know. Should I pull that real quick? Okay, yeah. Let me.
If you think it will give more of an insight.
Yeah, because it's a good.
You can always edit all the other stuff out.
That's true. Oh, here it is. This. In the background, because it's hard, because I know it's hard to understand, but she does call Darren, and Darren is like, oh my God, there's blood just everywhere. But that is how the whole 911 call goes. It's really hard to listen to just as a mother, because I cannot imagine just seeing your kids dying. I mean, it just breaks my heart.
I agree with you. I mean, nobody knows unless it happens to you how you're going to react on a phone call if that's just you just woken up and that's happened to your children. And also, at that moment she didn't realise how badly she was injured either.
Exactly.
So I don't think there's anything that sort of shows guilt in the way that she answered about the fingerprints and things like that, and mine's all jumbled at that time.
Yeah, I know that the 911 call never bothered me. I just hear a very hysterical woman, and God, I can't even imagine. Their birthdays were coming up, and I mean, all the neighbors said that she was like a really nice mom. A lot of kids played with, her children. There was very few. Some people came forward and said when she was at this one, it was like a place where you buy guns, that her kids were acting up, and they were disturbed because she said, get the fuck over here. I don't know. I guess because she was cursing, but I think in the past, I'm sure I cursed at my kids. So that doesn't bother me either. That stuff doesn't bother me. I'll tell you the problem right off the bat with this case. It came out 2 years after the Susan Smith case. She admitted to the fact that she killed both her children. She put them in a car, buckled them up, and let them sail into the river. And that was in 94, October 4th, I think. That case was so on people's minds that a lot of people think that when Darlie came out with this, they were automatic, like she was convicted before she was even in the door because of the Susan Smith case. There was a couple that came out. There was another one in Texas, the Andrea Yates case. She killed 5 of her kids, but that was after, and Andrea Yates had psychosis. People were more lenient with her. But the Susan Smith case, I definitely feel influenced what transpired with Darlie Routier.
Just as a side note, it's funny that, because last night I watched on YouTube a documentary about that Susan Smith.
Really?
And it was concerning, the fact that she murdered her 2 children off the boat ramp at this secluded dock.
Right.
But what I didn't realise, that a family of 7 went down the boat ramp to look at the memorials that had been left, and the handbrake failed on their camper van, and they all died, drowned in the same place.
I didn't learn about that until not too far ago, and I don't think a lot of people know that.
I had no idea about
Can
it.
you?
That's so tragic.
Is that unbelievable? I only recently, probably the last few months, I probably watched the same documentary, and I was like, what?
Yeah, just that it jogged my memory because I knew about and it told you about the 2. I mean, it's an awful murder. It's terrible. You can't imagine how them poor boys must have felt. But then to have an actual documentary about a family of 7 who just drove down that boat ramp to look at the memorial, and the handbrake didn't go on properly, and they all ended up drowning in the same place. That's awful.
I mean, that's like cursed, like a cursed place. That makes...
That's exactly what I said. I said that place is cursed. I wouldn't go near it.
No. And it was North Carolina, wasn't it?
I can't remember.
Let me just see. I'm just to make sure. Yeah, it was South Carolina. Oh, wait. It was South Carolina. I'm sorry. I knew it was the Carolinas. She was in South Carolina. I thought it was North Carolina, but I remember when it happened. I remember this case, the Susan Smith case. I always remember because she just looked suspicious right off the gate. But that was a whole other story. But yeah, I definitely think it influenced the Darlie Routier case. I mean, on here, the courts, I guess they, during the trial, the prosecution argued that Routier's injuries were self-inflicted, that the crime scene had been staged, and that she murdered her sons because of the family's financial difficulties. But that doesn't make sense because the defense looked into what she would have gotten. Their insurance was only $5,000. It didn't even cover the cost to bury them. So that's financial.
That's exactly right. That's a very good point. And also, what is a good point as well, is that Darren had just insured Darlie's life for $250,000.
I didn't know that.
It turned out that there was a conflict of interests with with Darlie's lawyer.
No, what?
Because he was also Darren's lawyer first.
And
apparently, I mean, this guy was getting paid £250,000 to defend Darlie, but he'd already told Darren that he was going to keep him out of him because he was Darren's lawyer first. So he shouldn't have been the lawyer for Darren and Darlie.
Wow.
He should have been just the lawyer for one or the other.
And he was the lawyer throughout?
Yeah, no, he was the lawyer right till the end of the court case. Then they ran out of money to pay him, so they had to have a different lawyer for any sort of cases after that. And he said, the guy who'd been, I can't remember his name now. I did write it down, but I can't remember his name, because they hadn't paid him in full. That any books or films or anything that was made of the murder, all the proceeds had to go to him to repay what they still owed him out the £250,000, and that's why he would not have anything to do with any of the appeals, etc.
Oh my God! You would think he would do. Oh my God! Lawyers are brutal.
But you see, that also is a reason why it should have been a mistrial. Because
Yes.
he should not have been the lawyer for the husband and the wife. Because if it's not in the wife's interest if the husband did it.
Yeah, that is. Was it Stephen Cooper?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But he was apparently he was a very famous.
Oh, okay.
I wish I'd.
Yeah.
I wish I'd written his name down now, but I remember I didn't. I did, but I can't find it. But I do know that was the story that I saw.
Oh, okay. Douglas Parks was appointed to represent Darlie. Parks worked as Darlie's public defender until he was replaced by Doug Mulder.
That's him.
Yeah, that Doug Mulder sounds familiar too.
Yeah, apparently he was a top defense.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
$250,000 because to do it, and it was found out later that he was already working for Darren.
You see, one thing I know, no, guilty or innocent, this prosecution wanted Darlie so bad, hence why they tried her separately for each kid. They were going to, I do agree with that. There was definitely always the prosecution wants to get what they came for.
I mean, I don't think it's clear cut that she's innocent.
No.
But I do think, in this country, we have, it has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt.
Right. Yeah.
That a person murdered somebody, and I don't think there's enough evidence.
I think that it's unfortunate that I think a lot of times people get emotionally vested, and I think which I don't understand why Casey Anthony got away with what she got. I mean, oh my God.
That's definitely
that one hurt.
That was talking about it, weren't we? That sometimes we just don't get. You don't get British cases that we think are really, really famous here.
Right.
We don't get American cases that you think are really sort of famous, but that is one that we did get.
Yeah, that I know. I have to say there was this one Roberta Glass podcast. This is what I always thought Darlie was innocent until I heard this one podcast. There was a college student named Ryan Kessler, and he had petitioned the Texas courts to examine the Darlie Routier case. The kid is very intelligent, and if you listen to him on this Roberta Glass podcast, he really is a smart kid. But he was all about, he led the Free Darlie movement for a while, and then he went over all this case stuff, and then he changed his opinion. And that, when I listened to that, I was like, wow, there's such points with this case that I would really ultimately, if someone put a knife to my throat, I honestly, I don't know. But there's things that bother me, but like you said, I don't think it was enough that they gave her death. That really blows my mind.
I don't think she did herself any favours at all by changing her story. I think
that's exactly. The changing of the story was a very hurtful one. Yeah.
I think that worked against her.
Yes.
And of course, it's got to be mentioned, hasn't it? The silly string incident.
Oh, that.
I think, even though that was a travesty of justice, because that was only a few minutes at the end of a 2-hour memorial service.
Yeah.
That's all that the news people showed was
right.
The silly string incident, which I'm sure you can tell us about.
Gosh, this one. And many people, I remember I listened to many podcasts about it, and anyone, innocent or guilty, they always say, I cannot stand the way she's cracking her gum and just lackadaisically they're going to be in heaven. Even the Ryan Kessler, when he was going through the case, said, Darlie and her husband, they were odd people. So you have to think of that from the beginning. They were just two odd people that like to, their own little world. So you always have to get into the mindset of who you're talking about, too. So they were strange off the get go. And then you're going to bring in this silly string incident. They had a memorial for the children, the deceased children. And now there was apparently, like you said, 2 hours of it. But the first thing I heard about and made me learn about Darlie was there was this one part towards the end where they had a birthday party for, I guess it was Damon's birthday, and then it was going to be Devon's. So they had this birthday party for both of them, and they started spraying silly string, and they had invited, the neighbor said before the kids had died, she had invited them all to a birthday party, all the neighborhood children. So after they died, they said, well, we're still going to have the party. So that's why they did this. They did a memorial service first, and they were crying and very upset, but the news only showed when they had the little party and they were spraying silly string, and Darlie came up to the microphone, and she was smacking her gum, and oh, my kids, they're up in heaven, and it just looked so crass, and it didn't play well for her. If you go back before their children were killed, everyone said they were just strange people. It kind of fit with their personality, and they were going to have a birthday party anyway. You can kind of see it, but I know it really killed her. And the jury requested that they replayed that over and over again.
I think it was it 7 or 9 times?
Yes.
They wanted to watch, didn't ask to watch anything else, just that video of the silly string incident, which Darlie didn't even bring the silly string to it. Was it her sister?
Oh my God, I did not know that she didn't bring it. That is crazy. See, that's what happens if you micro focus. You're not going to be able to, if that's what they base their opinion on. That sucks because, some people always have to act happy in front of a camera. And, I myself at work, if I'm having a bad day, if somebody comes up to me, I'm always going to be cheerful. I'm never going to show my true feelings. So I think that people just looked at that, and it was annoying the way she came off, but that wasn't evidence. There was other evidence I'll go through that bothered me, but not that. That's how I learned about the case, the silly string.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that is why it was known to me, because I think that came over here, the thing about the silly string.
The silly string.
On the news or something, and I think that's why it stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
But if you take away your personal feelings towards her because of the silly string thing, whatever you want to think, and look at the evidence.
Yes.
As you will tell us, Deb, the evidence is not substantial.
First of all, the things that she had 2 wounds that this looked, in favor of her. She had one on her arm and one on her neck. Now, the neck wound was 2 millimeters from her carotid artery. That is not consistent with self-inflicted wounds, according to Chief Medical Examiner Vincent DeMaio. He said that he's never seen a self-inflicted wound that came that close to the carotid artery.
How can you be that precise?
That's just crazy.
How can you cut your own throat to throw the hounds off the scent?
Yeah.
Be that precise that you're going to be 2 millimeters away from cutting through your carotid artery?
Even if you're hysterical and you have adrenaline rushing, that is real. I as a person, as a human being, your reflex would not be to go that close. That is very scary. She almost killed herself. Well, somebody or she, whoever did it, that would have killed her.
Well, the other thing was as well, Deb, would she have had the presence of mind to not stab herself in the arm with the hand that she doesn't normally use?
Yes, that was another point that bothered me on the side of innocence. That really bugged me. It was her non-dominant hand, which does not make sense. Yeah.
It was such a deep stab. It was down to the bone.
Yeah.
And she had the presence of mind to think, oh, I better not do it with my right hand because I'm right-handed. I'll do it with my left hand into my right arm. That's very clever.
Yeah, and not only that, but now that you said that, do you know when he made a $250,000 life insurance to dollar? I mean,
yeah, just recently because they were in bad financial
right.
difficulty.
Yes.
And he had recently tried to take, I suppose to a rich man it's trivial, $5,000 loan out at the bank, and they'd refused it.
Wow.
So they were in deep.
They were in deep. They had made a self-employed business or something, and it was doing well.
He had some sort of business, didn't he? And it went massive. And so he made a lot of money, and they built. I mean, if you've seen the house is amazing.
Wow.
I mean, it's something that you'd think like some multi-millionaire lived in. It was amazing. But yeah, they definitely had money worries.
Okay, because then the business started going down, right? Isn't that what happened? And then they were trying to say.
Yeah. But you see, I've always had, you've got to try and balance it all, because there isn't enough evidence to say she's innocent either.
Yeah.
She always said that Darren had nothing to do with it. He was asleep in bed with Drake. So.
But what if he hired somebody?
Well.
Yeah, that part.
Have you got the bit there about the actual knife?
Oh yeah, the knife.
The knife.
There was a couple things that one of the things that always bugged me about on the side of guilty was there was so much blood by the sink, and they said that she must have been standing at the sink for a long time, not running back and forth, as she said, and there was droplets as well that they weren't like in towards the sink. They weren't, because she said she was running around the whole time, but when they examined the droplets, they had just spilled there. They weren't like backed off. So they said it was consistent with somebody standing there a very long time. And, so she wasn't running back and forth. She was actually standing still for a while. Also, the knife that was used to stab Damon with was consistent with, there was a screen that had been torn out, and there was some of the screen deposits were on the knife. And also they made a big deal about this sock that was outside, and they were like, oh, she could have never put it that far. But that young kid that was on that Roberta Glass show, he said he lived by her house, so he went over, and he said the sock was not as far as you. It was 75 yards. He said, but he said he actually timed himself. He said, and it only took like 2 seconds to throw a sock. So he was like, oh, in favor of her guilty at this point. And that was some of the things. Those were the 3 things he said about her to her being guilty was the blood on the knife, the screen on the knife, the blood. Oh, and the blood splatter was consistent with, it was on the back of her nightshirt, indicating that she had raised the knife over her head and withdrew it each time to stab the boy. Like the back splatter was consistent with that.
Yeah.
So those were the 3 things that bugged me.
One of the things that I thought that bugged me, that made me think that she wasn't guilty, was that when the knife that stabbed the boys and her was analysed, it only had the DNA of one of the boys and her on it.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Where was the other knife that was used on the other?
They never found that. Yes, they never found it. That's true.
And if there were 2 assailants, which is what could have been possible, one of them dropped the butcher's knife and the other one took his knife with him.
Yes. Damn. If that woman, she's been in there 23 years. I mean, that sucks if she is innocent, man.
I just don't, I don't see how she can unless they find the people who did it,
Yeah.
which I don't know.
Yeah, how can, yeah.
They're never gonna. I don't think they're gonna let her out. You know, and I think, you know, it's just not been proved. I mean,
Yeah.
in Scotland, they
It's
have a
come
completely
down
different-
to such tiny minute details. That's that's true. I know.
In Scotland, Deb, they have a completely different court thing in their country than we do. They actually have another verdict, which is called unproven.
See, we should have that.
So it doesn't mean that you're guilty, and it doesn't mean you're not guilty. It means that the case was unproven. If she'd been tried in the Scottish court, she'd have got away. She'd be home.
Absolutely. I think if they had taken her out of Texas, and I think that I don't know how if that lawyer was so fantastic, I don't know how he was not able to get that video taken out, because it's such a it has nothing to do. I mean, I know they were trying. See, I think that case was proven more so than all the physical evidence. It seems like it was proven on her character, and the silly string really hurt her, and I don't know how the lawyer was not able to get that taken out. I mean, it's such it doesn't have anything to do with it.
I don't, you know, he wasn't worth his 250 stop, because that is like.
She should have kept that public defender she had.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like, you know, that case I did the other day on Murder at Bedtime, that Florence Maybury.
Yes, I listened to that.
That is exactly the same. She was tried on the fact that she was supposed to be tried for murder, but she was tried because on the fact that the judge hated her because she had an affair.
That's it.
Her character was assassinated, and this is the same thing here. You can't find somebody guilty on the fact they sprayed some
silly string
and made their character look bad. They should have done it on the facts, and they really didn't have. I don't think.
And how the heck were they able to try? Like, they were able to get 2 different trials. Like, that's really scary. You got to get through 2 trials of both children. I never knew that until the other day. I did not know that they just tried her on the one child and not the other one.
Yeah, they did. They just tried her on the one because they wanted to keep one back in case they didn't get the right result.
You're right. And it would have made it easier.
Also, I think, isn't it something to do with the age? The younger age made it a death penalty or something.
Wow, there's so many.
They tried on the one where she would get the death penalty for it or something like that.
I'm sure. The prosecutors are ruthless.
I mean, I reckon, if you put this up on podcast, people will listen to it, but they haven't got the chance to reply to it, have they?
Right.
I think if you stick it up on YouTube, you'll get a lot of different...
Yeah, I'm definitely putting this on YouTube.
There's
yeah.
going to be people who want to comment in it and think that I'm talking a load of rubbish, don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. I would be anxious to hear.
Which is absolutely fine, because I probably am. There may be people out there who know more than I do.
Right.
You know, I'm sure people who don't disagree. Well, I don't know. You haven't really. You're sort of like half and half.
Yeah, because I'm telling you, that podcast really put me on the guilty side for a long time. I don't know. I go back and forth constantly. And now with this thing with him getting a life insurance, I don't know. It just makes me always think, money is the biggest motivator.
I would say in his defense that her mother won't hear a word against him. She says there's no way
he did that.
Hurt his kids.
Yeah.
And that's Darlie's mother.
Yeah.
I don't know. He seems like a quiet.
Yeah, he never came off poorly. He just came off as a nice guy.
Well, I'm still like sort of maybe thinking it was somebody who just came into the house.
They always say who's going to do that, but there's psychotic people everywhere. That doesn't surprise me at all. I've seen people kill kids here all the time. Every day somebody's getting shot. 6-year-old. It happens
everywhere. It's where you think it doesn't happen, it does.
And when people are on drugs, I'm talking like, I've seen so many Forensic Files episodes that people were smoking crack and they just wanted to like. Oh, and another thing they were saying, I just was going to say, and they robbed somebody. They said, well, why didn't they take the jewelry or the money? But what if somebody came in, tried to rob them, but then because it didn't go the way they thought, and then they ran out before they could get anything because Darren woke up and came running downstairs. So, I don't know. Like, if somebody did come in, maybe they didn't have a chance to rob them yet, because that was a big thing. They said, well, why didn't they take the jewelry or the money that was, I guess there was, her diamond jewelry was right there and it wasn't taken.
There was a load of jewelry on the side in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Now, if she was clever enough, right, to cut her own throat,
yeah, why wouldn't she hide the jewelry
and also stab herself in the wrong arm? Why wouldn't she have got rid of the jewelry first, dug a hole and put it in the garden or something, and say it had been stolen?
Yeah, with the socket. Oh my God, that's.
What are they trying to say? Are they trying to say that she just woke up and thought to herself, I know what, I'll stab my kids? It just doesn't.
I know.
I don't know. I just don't understand how that became a good enough case.
Because if she was planning it, why wouldn't she? God forbid, but why wouldn't she shoot them, which would be quicker, less messy? Why would you stab them?
Absolutely. And the girl, I think the woman could shoot, couldn't she?
Yeah, Texas, that's like the gun capital of the world,
It doesn't make any sense on any, unless she had a complete psycho breakdown.
Right.
Woke up from watching the television with her kids all evening and they'd fall asleep on the sofa, decides to pick up a butcher's knife and kill her kids and slash her own throat. It just doesn't make it. I think she got convicted on just that silly string thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
She may well have done it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough evidence.
Yeah, like you said, that would be a nice, not a nice, but it would be an intelligent thing to have not proven.
No, well, I don't. Let's be honest. The British justice system isn't the greatest in the world, but I don't think she would have been found guilty here.
No. And I think there was a lot of things that went into it. Besides the silly string, Texas is not the easiest state. Texas is like a gun tote. That's just the way they are. They always go for death. They're a brutal state. I think if she had been tried in a more calmer state, like the Midwest, like if they moved it to, I don't know if they can move it outside the actual state, but maybe if they moved it to a different area. And that silly string should never have been admitted to evidence. I wonder what would have happened if they did not have that silly string.
I don't think it would have been admissible in a British court.
It's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense.
I don't think it would have got played. I think they would have got it thrown out. I don't know, because I'm no expert on American law, but even in British law, if a person has got convictions for other things or even similar things, they're not allowed to be mentioned at the court case. The jury aren't allowed to know about previous convictions until after they've given their verdict.
Yeah, and that.
Now, I don't know if that's the same as in America.
It depends on the trial. The thing about American justice that's always driven me nuts is it's who has the better lawyer, always. And I remember my daughter at one point wanted to be a lawyer, and people from homicide were like, no way, you're too sweet. Lawyers, especially defense attorneys, they sell their souls. They have to.
A lot of these defense lawyers are psychopathic.
Absolutely.
They've got to be, because they've got no empathy.
That's it. They just want to win. It's all about winning. That's the problem. You get.
I'm not a lover of them.
No, the court system is. They will pick the most obscure laws or anything just to twist this. It all depends on how good your lawyer is.
They're being paid.
Somebody said it's not a justice system, it's a legal system. I've seen people get off for, I can't believe it, because they just have a really good lawyer. It really depends on your lawyer. Even with children, like when you're in a family court, the family courts are so messed up here. When people get divorced, it becomes vicious of who gets custody. And who gets custody is on who has the better lawyer, not the better parent. And do you know how many kids I've seen killed in Philadelphia? Because, like, this one time, I'm just thinking this case that just happened in the last 2 years. The woman tried to get a restraining order because her husband was literally going nuts. I can't remember their names, but they all petitioned to have him be supervised visits. The judge would not allow it, and he did kill the kid. I mean, he killed her because the judge was like, no, I can't take the rights away from the parent, which, all right, I can see that, but to a point.
It's broken. I think it's broken everywhere, though.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah.
It's like thinking back to the case that we've just been doing.
Right.
We have a thing in England called the CPS.
Right.
That's the Crown Prosecution Service. Yeah. And this is where the police make they make a case against somebody, and I suppose it's a bit the same as taking it to your DA.
Yes. Yeah.
The CPS make that decision as to whether all that hard work is worth them taking the chance on winning the case, or it's a case they think they possibly can't win, and if they possibly can't win, they won't try it. So I very seriously think that Darlie Routier probably would not even her case go through the CPS.
It's one of those cases, man. You can listen to 1,000. I because I've always was fascinated with this case. Back then, before podcasts, I always watched shows and everything, and I thought, wow. I mean, and she came off so well. She looks pretty beaten down now in court interviews, but in the beginning, she just seemed so earnest and truthful. I thought, I don't know. You know, it wasn't like Diane Downs where you could totally tell she was a scumbag and see right through her. Like Darlene, even with the little twisting of the story, always came off very well. I would like somebody to say, like, what makes you think that she's guilty, and what makes you think, like, what, besides the silly string, what makes you think she's guilty out of the forensic evidence? Like, really explain it, because I would love to hear that.
Yeah, me too. I would love somebody just to come on and take away the silly string completely and just say, why do you think this woman is absolutely guilty on anything apart from what you've seen at the silly string?
Right, exactly. That would be fascinating.
It'd be brilliant, wouldn't it? I look forward to that.
Oh, I do too. Because there's people that really can explain. Like, somebody had wrote to me about Diane Schuler case where it's called the Taconic Parkway Nightmare. She went backwards on the Taconic Parkway.
Do you know, I actually watched that.
Aunt Diane?
Yeah, something's wrong with Aunt Diane. Yeah, I watched that. And then somebody came round the other night and I said, have you ever watched that? And we watched it again and I still.
Isn't it?
Oh my God.
That's one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. That's my most top-rated case.
Amazing.
By far.
Brilliant.
Somebody said to me, they just wrote to me and said, do you think it's possible that she could have had a UTI, which I had, and made me so sick that one year, she just went ballistic? And I thought, it is possible. I mean, those UTIs, they kill women all the time.
Oh, God. Yeah.
It's an infection that just massively spreads through you.
I remember my nan had one once, and she was, oh my God, it spooked me, what the things that she was seeing. Maybe we should reprise that one and do that one, because I've got lots of questions.
Oh, let's do that, yes.
So we should do that one. That would be a great one.
That would be excellent. I could do because that's my highest rated one by far. I mean, off the charts.
There's loads of questions that are unanswered that I'd like to ask.
Oh, that's a great one. Yes, definitely.
Pencil that one in for the next time.
Definitely. It's penciled already.
Fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Lyndon. Another fabulous episode. This one was really good because this one I'm mind boggled by. I really am. And I go back and forth all the time.
Do you know what I liked about this one, Deb? This is the first time when we've sort of done it without having any problems.
I kept looking to make sure your voice was coming through.
I mean, all I'm hoping you're not going to say now is, oh my God, I forgot to press the record button, because honestly, I've got like last time.
Oh my God, I I was staring at that button like, I kept staring at the minutes ticking by because it shows me how long, and it's been an hour, and I was like, oh my God.
Well, as usual.
It was awesome.
It was still really.
You're the best.
When you've got to do it twice.
Yes.
Was it 6 hours we were doing?
Lyndon, we were sitting here forever.
It was 6 o'clock here in the evening, and we finished at midnight.
Yes.
We've actually done it in an hour. That's amazing.
That's amazing. We did talk for a little bit beforehand, but we did. When I pressed the button, it was a full hour. Oh, thank you, Lyndon. It's very enjoyable, and everyone.
It's always a pleasure, and it's always a blast.
Yes. I'm going to shut it. I'm going to put the music on. Let me just put the music on. I know it only shows on my end. Awesome. Oh, thank you, Lyndon. That was great. Yep.
You're welcome, Deb. Absolutely brilliant.